My name is Obed Figueroa. I am the founder for Diversity Premedical, LLC, and we are running this show called Lessons Learned. We have the privilege today to be with us, Dr. Maurice D. Hinson. So let me introduce him so you guys can learn more about him. He is an allopathic physician, MD, is the attending physician at New York Presbyterian Queens in the Department of Hospital Medicine. He is also an assistant professor of clinical medicine at Well's Cornell Medicine. Dr. Hinson received his BA in neuroscience from Johns Hopkins University. His medical degree was earned at Drexel University College of Medicine. He completed his residency in internal medicine at New York Presbyterian Well's Cornell Medical Center. Dr. Hinson also serves as the founding chairman of Youth Empowerment Services in Medicine, a nonprofit organization created to provide educational and networking platforms for underrepresented students who wish to pursue careers in medicine. So thank you for that. Dr. Hinson also is the founder and advisor of the Black and Latino Men in Medicine, a network of students, trainees, faculty, and hospital administrators to create and to combat the precipitous decline of Black and Hispanic male physicians. To end, Dr. Hinson is an ally advocating for an increase in representation and health equities for those underrepresented in medicine. So thank you so much. You are also a daddy and a husband?
That's right. Well, daddy, not married.
Not
Daddy.
married?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You get tied down, right?
To my little David. She's 2 years old.
Nice, nice. Beautiful. And it's a busy time for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now with we're starting to see a rise in COVID cases, so the hospital's getting busier.
Wow. You know, it's almost like when I'm speaking and connecting with practicing physicians, I almost want to say, like we say to the military, thank you for your service.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's intense. It's intense.
Yeah, funny enough, I was just prior to me taking on this job in Queens, I was doing this. I was a travel hospitalist, so I would go to different rural hospitals in the country, and I was recently in Delaware at Bay Health, and they have a military base right there, and a lot of them were staying at the same hotel that I was staying at. And every morning I would go out and I would say, I appreciate your service. No, I appreciate your service. So,
back at you, right?
Interesting time. Yeah.
Okay, so let's begin with I call this speed questions, just as it means to get to know you beyond medicine. So if you could just answer with your first thought.
Sure.
We'll fly through them. So PC or Mac?
Mac.
Okay. Android or iPhone?
Now it's iPhone. I was team Android for a while, but it's iPhone now. Yeah. It got me.
Favorite season?
Fall.
Okay. Favorite vacation spot?
Oh man, I love Curacao, Jamaica.
Favorite restaurant?
Any place with good crab legs.
Okay. Is there a favorite food, dessert, or snack that you crave it, and after you're done, you feel guilty?
Yeah, it's definitely snow crabs, shrimp. It's heavy in salt, butter, everything anti-physician,
Yeah. Yeah. Favorite TV show?
Martin.
Favorite movie?
Oh, either the Five Heartbeats or Harlem Nights.
Favorite music genre?
Early 90s R&B. Jodeci, yeah.
Oh. Favorite color?
Green, hunter green.
Favorite alcohol drink, if you drink alcohol?
Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite car?
Ooh. I have to say it's an Audi.
A favorite song?
Favorite song? Stay by Jodeci.
Now, thinking about your school experience, did you have a favorite subject in high school?
Chemistry, without question.
Is there a teacher that made an impression on you?
So I've always been a nerd at heart, and I love chemistry, between chemistry and physics, because I feel these two sciences pretty much explain virtually everything. And I always love the ability to experiment, to create things, and chemistry allows those elements. Um, and we did have in high school, we did have a chemistry teacher who was very passionate, genuinely cared for our learning.
Okay, now undergraduate, favorite subject?
Philosophy and religion, and that by far was my favorite class. Philosophy and all these various types of religions. So that by far was my favorite class.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So, if I were to ask you to think back to when you were in high school, I'm curious if indeed medicine or sciences was part of your interest back then. What were you thinking back then?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew I wanted to be a physician from the time that I was asked the first time, what do you want to be?
Hmm. And
Right
when
away.
was that asked?
This was elementary school. I was in second, third, fourth grade. I remember fourth grade, we had to draw out what we wanted to be. And I drew out me sitting over someone in the stretcher with a stethoscope.
Oh,
And I can't draw worth a lick. I made stick figures look horrible, but that was one of my best drawings. My pop still has it somewhere. He stored it.
mm,
But yeah, I've always known I wanted to be a physician, mainly because I was exposed to it early. So my pop was a trash man. He was a garbage collector. He worked for the city of Philadelphia, um, and usually worked at night. But when he worked during the day, he would send me across the street, to the doctor's office. The owner of our apartment building was a surgical oncologist at the Pennsylvania Hospital, and he had an office across the street from us. And the administrative assistant there had a daughter around my age, so I would go over there. They had a little kid section, so all day we would play in the kids section. And some of my earliest memories are going to the patients with my stethoscope and listening to their heartbeat. They would dress me up in a white coat and would be dragging on the floor. So this is one of my earliest memories, and that sparked an interest in medicine. And then, anytime I would see people in the neighborhood and they would ask me what I wanted to be in life, say a doctor, a doctor. And so everyone would always give me these nature books. And a lady around the corner from us, her late husband was a physician, and she gave me all of his books, and I couldn't understand them. But I would flip through the pages, and I will always be intrigued by the brain, just how, disgusting it looked, but the fact that that blob controlled the whole body, like that was fascinated by that. And that's one of the reasons why I went into to neuroscience at Hopkins. So I've always known that wasn't a question, and there was nothing that anyone could tell me to make me feel like I wasn't going to become a doctor either.
thank you so much for being here. So that was high school. When you got into the content, though, in high school, because you had the vision that you of this interest, but did it challenge you? What did it like make you think twice?
Not so much the content. I was always a good student.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a profound interest in the sciences and math. I was always like really good in math and science. Fortunately, God blessed me with that natural ability to pick up on these pretty quickly. But my struggle in high school, as it was in middle school as well, was more of an identity crisis. Um, so up until I was about 9 or 10 years old, I actually lived in a good neighborhood in Philly, actually one of the most affluent areas, Society Hill, literally down the street from Ben Franklin's home, the historical monument now. Um, Even though my father's salary didn't match you know, the median salary of that neighborhood, he's still, you know, my pop is one of those people, he can talk his way in anything. Somehow he talked his way into getting this apartment from the surgical oncologist. You know, he really harbored on the single parent father, trying to give me a better opportunity, you know, and he won the heart of the owner. And so I was able to live there and go to a really good elementary school. And you know, it was being Black in that neighborhood was an eye opener, just because I knew I was different. You know, so all my friends growing up, they were of various different ethnicities, Taiwanese, Russian. You know, my closest friend growing up was Black and Puerto Rican. But for the most part, they were non-Black, right? So when I was around them, because, you know, I still live with my pop, and he, you know, he's originally from the hood in Philly, from the bottom. That's out West Philly. And he still kept the same circle. So I grew up around that. So when I was with my non-Black friends, I was too hood, right? But then, you know, when we went to the other areas, so, you know, my pop's girlfriend at the time lived in the projects in South Philly. So I was around there a lot and playing ball with the guys around there. But when I was with them, I was white, you know, I was an Oreo, you know, so I grew up, depending who I was with at the time, I tried to act more like them, you know, so growing up, I always felt like I was acting, you know, and then when I got to high school, I carried that into high school. And funny enough, it was actually Mr. Perkins' class where I felt that was severed entirely. He was one of these very passionate teachers, but just couldn't really connect with us. You know, he was just sort of too smart, but just lacked some of the social, especially for high school students. I think it's hard to connect with any high school student really at times. And he was livid one day because no one was participating. You know, he would ask if anyone did the homework and no one would volunteer. He was asking questions and no one raised their hand. So he went off on us. White guy turned apple red. Again, very passionate. Like he loved this job and valued us learning. And, you know, he told us, oh, you have an immense opportunity here, because I went to an all-Black high school, but it was a magnet high school. High School of Engineering and Science, George Washington Carver. And I remember he was going off, and then right in the middle of it, I raised my hand and blurted out the answer. And then he was like, oh, thank you, finally, someone that did the homework, da 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 da. So then he kept asking questions again. I knew no one else would answer them, so I just kept answering them, kept answering. And literally half the class would applaud. It was like, okay, like he really, you know, did well. And then the other half was like, oh, this one. Like, you know, like mad that I was showing off or whatever. And it was that moment that I realized that you're never going to make everyone happy, right? So if you can't make everyone happy, at least make yourself happy. And so from that moment on, I developed this comfort with who I was. I was neither one of these groups. I was a composition of all of them, you know, and I finally felt comfortable with that. And, you know, going into the spaces that I've had to go into now, like I was an RA in college and now being a physician, what was once an insecurity is now a strength. You know, being able to, regardless of what patient I encountered, being able to relate to them to some degree. Because that, you know, especially being a physician, our job is contingent on being able to build these relationships, being able to build that rapport. You know, you're not gonna follow suit with someone who you don't trust, who you can't relate to. You know, this is one of the issues. This is one of the greatest issues that we have in the Black community regarding the state of our health, because we don't see physicians like us. We have these white men, these white women who are telling us what to do, and we already don't trust them, you know, just to be completely frank. Historically, I mean, and you can, I think, you know, when you think about it, it's warranted, you know, it's to be expected, Historically, this country has not fared well to Black people when it came to medicine and science. Oftentimes, medicine was advanced off the exploitation and torture of Black people.
Right.
And that, even though, we claim it happened so long ago, no, it still continues today. It may not be as egregious, but we still see remnants of this racial prejudice that exists in healthcare delivery today. So, the fact that we don't have Black male and female physicians to care for Black patients, Hispanic male and female physicians to care for Hispanic patients, we're missing out on being able to really match the needs of these communities. Mm-hmm. So,
well, you've touched base on so much to unpack. Wow. Let me, I'm gonna try to stay on track because I want to unpack a lot with you. Okay, going to undergrad. What was your thinking then? So you graduated from your high school, and now you're applying to colleges. Were you the first in your family?
I was, yeah, wow. To go to college, yeah.
First in the family. Did you have a mentor to help you with that process and understand that landscape?
I had a great mentor in high school, Miss Carmen Jones. She was the guidance counselor. She's the one that she's the one that kept me straight, that kept me on the right path. She would literally pull me into her office and make me fill out applications for scholarships and applications for summer programs, and she would invite recruiters to come in, and when they came in, she pulled me in. She said, "You need to talk to them." She told me and my pop where to go, because again, I had no idea how to navigate this space. So she showed me the way, and without question, she's the one that got me into Hopkins.
Wow, what a blessing! So, what a blessing! Now you get there, and again, you didn't have any role models of this before. How did it feel to be in that space for the first time?
It was without question. It was a culture shock going from an all-Black high school to Johns Hopkins, where I'm one of few Black students. But it wasn't as much of a shock because all throughout high school, every summer, I would go away to a university for some sort of program. And in that space, I was also one of few. So, I got used to that. And again, growing up, I was used to being, the only Black kid on the block, So it wasn't foreign to me, but it was still a shock because of how big the campus is and how few of us there actually were. But what that did was it drove us to be closer together. Some of my closest friends are people who I met in college. So,
yeah, and so, what were your challenges there academically? Did you have any challenges academically in your undergrad?
I did. My freshman year was the first time I got a C ever in a writing course, and funny enough, the writing course, because I never really liked writing. I was always math and science. And so I will always try to pick the easiest writing courses. Like we needed certain numbers of writing credits to graduate. And I picked a sociology course, not really realizing that sociology courses are not easy. It's a lot of reading, it's a lot of writing. And the course that I selected, I thought I would be brilliant in. It was on racism in American education or something like that. Who better to write about racism in American education than a victim of it? But my teacher, she was tough, boy. I mean, but it was because my writing structure, the content was there. I had experience, I had stories, but being able to articulate it effectively and grammatically correct, that was a different story. So that was my first C. It certainly wasn't my last C. I was heartbroken when I got a C in calculus. I'm like, this is math. Like, it's supposed to be my thing. I got a C in physics. So at a point, I just got accustomed to getting C's. I was like, this is not gangster. I don't like this at all. But it was, this was me actually working hard to do it. College was a whole different ball game.
How did you flip it to be successful? Did you change anything? What did you do?
To be honest, I didn't do that well academically in college for several reasons. One, I didn't really know how to study. I don't think I acquired that until I got to med school, to be honest. I didn't know how to study. And I did way too much while I was in college. I overextended myself. So rather than test, so college was the first time that I had the opportunity to do virtually anything that I wanted, be a part of any group. I was working, I was doing research, I was an RA. I was in maybe 3 different organizations. I pledged, I was just doing a lot. And the thing that I compromised were my academics. But even in retrospect, to be honest, I wouldn't change it. Especially saying that I was able to get to this point now without having done, super well academically, because I'll say this, I would have removed some of the memberships that I were a part of. However, the network that I gained, the social skills that I acquired, I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, sense of community.
Yeah, we were mentoring. Like I would, these experiences I will not take away. I do think I could have balanced it better. But for the amount that I was engaged in these activities, really helped to develop my social character. So I wouldn't take that away, but I would eliminate some of the extraneous things and balance these things a little better. And I would have been more proactive about seeking mentorship.
Okay. Because it's all in preparation for med school, because you were thinking at that time, that's my direction, that's where I'm going, right?
Right.
So you knew that you had those C's were going to come back to haunt you.
Right.
How were you successful in getting accepted to a medical school with C's? Like, what was that experience?
So I knew I wanted to take some time off. So during the summers of my undergrad, I spent at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in the Dennery lab. Phyllis Dennery, she was the chief of neonatology there. So I was doing basic science research. Again, I love research. And I knew after I finished college that I wanted to do more research and be published before I got into med school. So that's what I did. I asked her for a job, and she made me a research technician. I did that. The plan was to do that for 2 years and then to apply for med school.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I did. So I went full time being a research technician. And she was another incredible mentor, French Canadian Black woman. The epitome of a boss, like a superwoman. She was the chief of neonatology. She was the head of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania. She was the president of a peer-reviewed journal.
Say her name again, please.
She was a wife. She was a mother. Phyllis Dennery. Yeah, and I remember when I went to interview for the position after college, she sat me down. This was the same woman who I worked with every summer. She sat me down and she said, "Well, you understand you're not just going to come in here and collect the check. You're not just going to punch in and punch out." She was like, "I want you involved in the research designs. I want you involved in the writing. I want you submitting abstracts. I want you presenting at conferences." And she pushed me to do that. And, because of that, I went to a number of different conferences, presented, won several different awards, the biggest being the Young Investigators Award, which they usually only give to early trainees. But here I was, just a pre-med student. So she was an incredible mentor.
Mm.
And I mean, with regard to applying to med school, um, having that research helped me, but I actually didn't get accepted into med school.
Mm-hmm.
I got waitlisted for 2 schools and then dropped off that. So I ended up having to do a post-bac, which I did at Drexel. And through Drexel's post-bac, the DPMS program, I got into their College of Medicine.
Yeah, that would have been my committee's response as well. A few committees that I've been leading, they would have looked for that post-bac
Mm-hmm.
with having multiple C's. So the post-bac, how did that help you?
It forced me to learn how to study. And it was by fire, because it was, for many of us, that was like our last resort. It was guaranteed admission. However, you had to have at least a 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
And our 3.0 was the average score of the medical students. So we were taking the same courses, several of the same courses as the medical students.
Yeah.
And their average was our 3.0. So in order to do better, we had to do better than the medical students. And then we had to have a certain score on the MCAT. Fortunately, I'd already had the MCAT score, but I had to get the GPA.
Gotcha.
Which was not easy. But we all banded together. I mean, this was essentially Drexel's pipeline for Black students getting into their medical school.
Nice.
But we all leaned on each other because there was no competition between us. If we all made the contract, we all got in. So it was very supportive. We formed study groups. We learned from each other how to study. So it was a real community effort to getting into med school.
Wow. Okay, so then you get in. Was it all what you thought it would be in med school?
No, med school was by far academically the toughest experience, because so much material is thrown at you, and you're expected to know it. You're expected to study nonstop, and that was never me. I was always, I have to do something else also. I'm passionate about other things as well, and actually, during my first year and some change, I was working. I was a valet overnight, and which is a rare instance. Most people don't work during med school.
You're right about that.
I needed the money. And so I wasn't doing as well. I was in a really toxic relationship. And I remember the dean of student affairs called me because we were pretty close, because we worked closely together to launch a mentoring program that I started in med school. And she calls me and she says, your name came up on an at risk of failing for 3 out of your 5 major courses. And she said, we all think that you should strongly consider doing the extended curriculum, which was splitting year 2 into 2 years. So rather than graduating in 4 years, I would graduate in 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I told her, all right, well, give me a day. Let me think about it. I went back. I looked through all my exam grades, calculated what I needed in order to pass for the next test. And when I went back to look at my grades, I hadn't done better than a 72 in any of my tests.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were below 70, which is technically failing in med school, at that school. And I had to average at least an 84 in the remaining tests. So that same day, and it wasn't the most professional thing that I've done, but that same day I called my job. I was like, yeah, I'm not showing up again. You had to find, and I had to work that night too. I'm like, yeah, I'm not coming in tonight. Like I'm not compromising my future for pennies. Well, it wasn't. I was making good money, but I'm not going to compromise my future as a physician to make a couple dollars. And then things ended with my relationship, and then literally from that point up until finals, I was literally the first person at the school turning the lights on in the computer room studying. I can't say I study all night. My brain shuts down when the sun goes down, but I was the first one there. I'm a morning person. And again, this is what being in med school taught me. Like, okay, this is when I'm best. This is when I'm at my best.
Yeah.
Early in the morning. And then I would take breaks. I wouldn't leave. I would bring my lunch. I would bring dinner. My breaks would be going to the gym. Like, that's when I was most fit. It was just and it was a routine every single day. And then, fortunately I was able to pass.
Yeah. And we're so glad that you did. Wow. There's a lot there. Can you give me what does a day in the life look like for you in practice?
Right now, so I'm a hospitalist, which just means I take care of patients who are admitted to the hospital. And it could be of a broad range of pathologies: heart failure, myocardial infarctions, sepsis, pneumonia, especially now. And so typically when I'm working during the day, I'll arrive like 7:30. I'll get my patient census, go through the labs, their vitals, previous notes from other specialists, and then generate a plan for those patients based on this information. Then I would call. Right now, I have a team of physician assistants, PAs. I would call them. We would go over the plans together. They would inform me of any sort of additional information that they may have gathered. And then I would go and see the patients, examine them, talk to them, find out what's going on. Then I would speak to the care managers. And I think that this is an essential piece, is the sort of the multidisciplinary element of medicine. It's not just the physician and patient. It's the physician, it's the PAs, your residents, it's nursing, it's the social workers, care managers. Like, all of these people function as a team for this one patient. And it's necessary. It's necessary. I think the hardest working people in the hospital, without question, nursing and care management. The things that they have to do and things they have to get arranged to get people out the hospital safely has a tremendous impact on whether or not they return within 30 days, which is never a good thing, and whether or not they have everything they need when they get home. So, that's equally, if not more important, as what we do in the hospital. I mean, I say, if not more important, because you can look on Google and Up to Date and figure out how do you treat, heart failure, but it's not as easy to say, okay, what's the most appropriate disposition plan for this patient? What services do they need at home? Like, these are things that require you actually knowing the patient. Medicine right now, unfortunately, because it's dominated by the business of healthcare, we spend the majority of our time in front of a computer, which is not ideal, but you understand it is a business. But in many ways, the business of healthcare has sort of killed the science and art of medicine, and mainly when it comes to engaging and really understanding your patient.
Yeah, I've heard this. You touched on a couple of things in my previous conversations, and just I've lived it as well, being in this space of medical education. So the first is that the recurring theme I keep hearing is that medical students say that they were not prepared for the business aspect going into practice. And I laughed about it before with someone else, and that we dared not suggest it be added to the curriculum because it's already a curriculum that's just overwhelms one. But it is that business piece shocks them. They go into shock and they have to learn it quick, the business aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think especially for those who go into primary care or outpatient medicine.
And then you touch on another thing that I keep hearing over and over, and then the significance of cultural competency. Like
Mm.
we can say absolutely throughout the business industry, this is required and lacking, but
Mm.
also quite significant in medicine.
Mm.
I remember doing a paper on this as well. It's so critical that a practicing physician has some cultural competency training,
Mm.
because you're talking about connecting to a person.
Right.
You're giving suggestions to a person, and if you don't know those impacts that it has on the culture of that person, they may not be receptive, they may reject.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is actually something that we're looking into currently. The Black and Latino Men in Medicine that I advise, we're actually working on a paper that's partly addressing this issue,
Mm-hmm.
because not all forms of cultural competency are equal.
Mm.
I think for a while when we first started understanding the value of cultural competency, it was a lot of mandatory online modules, and people aren't really receptive to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so several things. People don't like being mandated to do something that's outside their norms, their practical norms, and also it's ineffective. It's just an ineffective tool to have someone sit in front of a computer and try to teach them how to be culturally competent. Find that, in that instance, their ignorance may diminish somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
but immediately after it goes right back. Changing the individual's perception and changing the individual's behavior is changing the environmental culture.
Right.
Once you engender an environment of diversity, cultural competency, then the people who work within that environment start to engender these elements better.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're finding is that the most effective forms are sort of a top-down approach rather than targeting the individual and saying, here, you need to change. No, the culture, the environment needs to change.
Right.
And so it's very interesting. This in itself is its own science.
There's one person that I interviewed. You're familiar with SNMA?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they know me as well. I love them for decades. So I interviewed someone who started the chapter in Brooklyn, CUNY Brooklyn. And she was describing to me, her frustration, and she was very grateful for SNMA, but she said in her context, she would get frustrated, and she was happy to have a group to turn to, an organization to turn to for supports,
Yeah.
to kick things off, bounce things off of, right? And she said, and I wonder how you feel about this. She said, part of the advice that came back to her, she said, was they would look at it. Well, is this something we can change now in the upfront, or is it something that you'll be more effective after you become a physician to address whatever those issues would be?
Yeah.
And and if it was a fight worth to take on now when you're in transition to become,
Yeah.
it's like everybody's thinking like this strategically, how to be most effective,
Right. Right.
at no cost to yourself, so that you can then get to that goal and have the autonomy.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a tough spot. I mean, that's as you're going through as a trainee, as a student, as a trainee, you understand just how powerless you are in that space. And then when someone does something that violates your peace, violates your humanity, does something egregious, you always contemplate, well, should I say something? Should I do something? This is a person who oversees my advancement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough position to be in. And in many ways and many times, most of us have felt completely emasculated at one point.
Yeah, and so some of us are fight, some of us are flight.
Right.
And, yeah, I strongly encourage individuals that may experience something like that is to reach out, to speak to your mentors. Don't just flight. Don't just flight.
Exactly. Yeah. And to her point, these groups are absolutely imperative. so that we can have these real discussions. This was actually the inspiration for Black and Latino men in medicine.
Nice.
Because I saw, I was one of maybe 3 Black men in our department, and we had 140 residents, or the largest department. And if I did see someone else Black in the hospital that was a physician, they were likely the only one in their department. The microaggressions that we face in medicine, we're not just because we made it to this esteemed position doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with the same racial biases that Black men face in society as a whole.
Absolutely. President Obama is as well at the highest level we can be, and still had issues that he worked through. And so, and to end, because I swear we can go 2 hours, and I don't want to do that. Thank you. So one final point, because you spoke about this, I want to make sure I address it. That feeling of the only one. How did you? We've all dealt with it. We push through it. We internalize it. How did you? And I hear your conditioning in the beginning, which I think really set you up for success. Being young amongst a diverse group when you were young, and being the only within that, but you learned how to navigate, is my assumption, when you were young, that it carried you through.
Yeah.
How did you feel, throughout your years being in that situation? How did, when you were internalizing, what did you do to make sure that your head was right? You check yourself and your success, ensured your success.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest barriers that we sort of self-impose is this imposter syndrome. Where we feel like we haven't deserved the position that we were granted for whatever reason. They whether we're throwing affirmative action or whatever, they messed up the applicant. They must have had me confused. We feel like we're the dumbest one in a room. And the root of that is just an overall lack of confidence. And I think that there are many reasons for this. I think one of the big reasons is, the moment that we become aware of the world and our presence in it, we're thrown into a Eurocentric educational system that teaches us that our history began as slaves. And so immediately we're sort of subjugated to this state of inferiority. It's reinforced by standardized testing that historically we do worse in, because they're more of a marker of access and opportunity than they are actual cognitive ability. And so as we age, those of us who are still able to overcome those deficits, those psychological deficits, and do well academically, we evolve into that, wow, maybe, I don't deserve this. Maybe I am the dumbest one here. And, we sort of question our right to be in this space. We question the amount of work it took to overcome the challenges that we had that many of our peers have no idea or haven't had to deal with, that were remotely close to what we did. So the fact that we overcame that and ended up in the same space just tells us just how strong and intelligent we actually are. And so for me, it took understanding that. It took recognition of just how strong, just how intelligent, just how hard I've actually worked. And I would look at my resume and I'm like, look, I know my resume can stand up to anybody else's. Nobody gave me these things, and I think you have to develop a thick skin to a degree. And you can do that by reaffirming yourself and telling yourself, like, I definitely deserve to be here. I knew what I had to do to overcome what I had to overcome to get to this point. And it's a very fine line between confidence and arrogance, understandably. I'm not saying to be arrogant. I think you can be humble and still be confident. And that's what I would suggest. You know, it's just a matter of reaffirming yourself. You know, I'm a huge believer in the self-fulfilling prophecy, which is just a matter of believing what you want to actually have happen.
Actually.
You know, if you tell yourself, if you know, what the world does, what society does is it tells us that we're inferior, that we're stupid, that we're dumb, right? If we start to believe that, we actually become that, right? Because they're telling us that we're dumb. And even if we're even if we're like suppressing that, they're telling us we're dumb. We do one thing that's dumb. Now all of a sudden, oh, you know what? Maybe they were right the whole time. I failed the test. Man, maybe I am dumb. Like, no, it's a matter. We have to constantly combat this imagery and this conditioning of us being inferior. We are not inferior. It's just our environment imposes this false sense of being intellectually, socially, academically, educationally, economically inferior. You know, and we have to begin our ability to advance beyond this begins with understanding just how much value and worth we actually have. So
believe it. You got me wanting the finger snap so bad. Yeah. Thank you. All right, guys. So this is going to end this episode. I'd like to give thanks to Dr. Hinson. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This is awesome. Anytime.
And we look forward to continuing the conversation with our members next week. All right. So have a great day, guys.